The champagne sparkled in the crystal glass, reflecting the dazzling lights of the Manhattan penthouse. But as Aryan gazed out at the sleeping city below, the title of billionaire felt hollow. A phantom pain throbbed in his chest, a ghost from a past life. It was a sharp reminder of a cold, rainy night, the night he was thrown out of his home. Clutching a torn shirt, watching his mother's smile disappear forever. His story didn't start in a boardroom. It began in a dusty, forgotten village where innocence was a luxury he could never afford. He was just a boy with wide, curious eyes, watching his father, a simple weaver, toil for 18 hours a day. Their lives were not their own. They were dictated by the whims of a cruel local landlord, a man who held their dignity in his iron fist. One stormy night, the air thick with the smell of rain and fear, a dispute over a meager loan escalated. The landlord's men stormed their small hut. Aryan watched, paralyzed, as they threw his family and their few possessions out into the cold, unforgiving mud. The image of his father, a proud man, begging for a sliver of dignity, shattered something deep inside the young boy. That night wasn't just heartbreaking, it was the death of his childhood and the birth of a relentless fire. They fled, seeking refuge in the chaotic, sprawling slums of a massive city. Here, the real struggle began. Life became a relentless grind. Aryan started working at a small tea stall, his days filled with the clatter of glasses and the steam of boiling chai. His nights were spent under the dim glow of streetlights, poring over borrowed books. Hunger was a constant companion, a gnawing ache in his belly, but he channeled every ounce of his pain, every tear of frustration, into a singular, burning goal: survival. He washed cars, cleaned toilets, and endured humiliations that would break most people. Yet, through it all, he wore a mask of stoicism, never letting the turmoil within show on his face. He learned early that in the jungle of the city, showing weakness was an invitation for predators. Years blurred into a haze of sweat, grime, and exhaustion. The city took its toll. His father, the man who had worked his fingers to the bone, succumbed to a simple, treatable illness. They just didn't have the money. It was a senseless, heart-wrenching tragedy that left Aryan utterly alone, with only his grieving mother to care for. The weight of that loss cemented his resolve. He would not fail. He could not fail. One day, while cleaning the office of a wealthy businessman, Aryan saw it. A computer. It sat on a polished desk like a monolith from another world, humming with promise. It was his ray of hope. Gathering every scrap of courage he possessed, he approached the owner. He begged, offering to work for free, to do anything, just for the chance to learn how to use that machine. The owner, a man who had perhaps seen a similar spark in his own past, saw the raw desperation and fierce intelligence in the boy's eyes. He agreed. That single moment was the turning point. Aryan didn't just learn, he devoured knowledge. He poured himself into the world of programming, the logical flow of code, a soothing balm to his chaotic life. The ghostly image of his father's helpless face became his fuel. When others slept, he worked, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Driven by a need to build something that could never be taken from him, he created a small, innovative software solution for the logistics industry. It was brilliant. Slowly, painstakingly, it started to gain traction. He was finally building a new life, brick by digital brick. But success, as he quickly learned, casts a long shadow and attracts predators of a different kind. A massive, ruthless corporation caught wind of his software. They didn't want to partner. They wanted to crush him and steal his creation. They slapped him with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, accusing him of intellectual property theft. The irony was suffocating. The very thing he had built with his blood and sweat was being used as a weapon against him. It was a classic David versus Goliath battle, and the world watched, expecting the giant to win. The courtroom was a crucible. The air was thick with tension. When Aryan took the witness stand, his voice trembled, but his words were unshakable. He spoke of the sleepless nights, the flickering streetlights, the memory of his father's hands. He presented his original drafts, scribbled on scraps of paper, his initial lines of code filled with comments that were more like diary entries of his struggle. He laid his entire journey bare for the court to see. His truth was raw, undeniable, and powerful. Against all odds, the judge ruled in his favor. It was a victory not just for him, but for every underdog who had ever dared to dream. That victory was the launchpad. His company skyrocketed. The boy from the slums became a titan of the tech industry. Decades later, with a fortune he could once only dream of, Aryan returned to his village. He bought the entire estate where the cruel landlord had once lived, the very land from which he had been cast out. But he didn't stop there. He sought out the landlord's son. He found him, not living in luxury, but bankrupt, working as a common laborer. His life a mirror of the poverty his father had inflicted on others. Here was Aryan's chance for revenge. He could have crushed him, savored the moment, and completed the circle of hate. But as he looked at the man, he didn't see an enemy. He saw another soul trapped by the past. In an act that stunned everyone, Aryan offered him a job. He had come to understand a profound truth. Revenge is a fire that consumes you from within, keeping the wounds forever open. Forgiveness, however, is the water that cleanses them, allowing you to finally heal. He built a state-of-the-art hospital in his village, naming it after the father he had lost to poverty. It stood as a beacon of hope, ensuring no one else would suffer the same fate. And so, standing in his penthouse tonight, the champagne in his hand feels less like a trophy and more like a testament. Aryan finally understands, true wealth isn't the billions in his bank account or the towering skyscrapers that bear his name. His true success was never about reaching the sky. It was about the incredible, arduous, and beautiful journey from a mud hut. All the way up, it was about turning pain into purpose, and scars into stars. Hunger has a specific sound. It's not a growl or a rumble. It's the silence that rings in your ears when everyone else in the slum is asleep, but your stomach is screaming for just a single handful of rice. My name is Aryan, and I learned to befriend this silence, turning it into the rhythm of my typing. The move from our small village to the city slums was a brutal awakening. The struggle was no longer just about food, it was about identity. My father, once a proud weaver whose hands created intricate patterns on silk, was now pulling a heavy rickshaw under the scorching sun. His strong, calloused hands, which once held threads of color, now gripped the worn-out handles of a vehicle that carried the weight of our broken dreams. The city treated us with a cruel indifference. People looked right through us, as if we were invisible ghosts, haunting their clean streets. We were there, but we didn't exist. I found work at a small roadside tea stall. It was a flimsy wooden shack located right outside a massive, glittering tech park. Every day, I served endless cups of chai to engineers, their voices buzzing with words I didn't understand. Algorithms, Java, C++, cloud computing. I didn't know what these words meant, but I saw the respect they commanded. I saw the confidence in their eyes, the ease in their posture. I realized that in this new, modern world, code was the new weaving loom. It was a tool that could build a future, a language that could grant you a voice, and I wanted, more than anything, to learn how to speak it. My turning point, my ray of hope, came in the form of a discarded laptop. A kind customer named Mr. Roy, a senior engineer who often stopped for tea, noticed my quiet curiosity. He saw the way my eyes followed the conversations about technology, the way I'd linger just a little longer when they discussed a new project. One evening, he handed me an old, heavy laptop. He said he was going to throw it away anyway. It had a cracked screen, and the battery barely lasted 20 minutes without being plugged in. But to me, it wasn't junk, it was a diamond. It was a key to a world I was desperate to enter. I couldn't afford an internet connection, of course, so my nights were spent outside brightly lit cybercafes. Huddled in the dark, trying to connect to their Wi-Fi. I would guess passwords for hours. Anything from admin and Oistrais to the cafe's name, hoping for a lucky break. Sometimes, it worked. Other times, I'd scavenge through the trash bins of nearby coaching centers, looking for discarded PDF textbooks or printed notes. My treasure hunt yielded guides on Python. That's where I started. Learning to code was not easy. The structured logic of programming clashed violently with the utter chaos of my poverty-stricken life. There were days I'd study in the dim light of a street lamp, the pages of a torn book held down by a rock, while the sounds of arguments and crying babies filled the air. I'd code for 18 hours straight, my eyes burning, my back aching, fueled by a raw, desperate need to escape. Every line of code was a protest. Every function I wrote was a prayer for a different life. It was me against the world, armed with a broken laptop and a stolen internet connection. Then came the darkest night of my life. My father, after pulling a double shift to pay for a leaky roof, collapsed. We rushed him to the nearest government hospital, a place that smelled of disinfectant and despair. They demanded a deposit before they would even look at him. A deposit we didn't have. I ran from pillar to post, from one closed-door office to another, my innocent eyes begging for help, for a sliver of compassion. But the system was a cold, unfeeling machine. My father died on a cold metal stretcher in a crowded hallway, just another forgotten soul. Holding his cold, lifeless hand, a hand that had worked so hard for so little, I made a vow. I wouldn't just survive, I would conquer. I would build something so big that the world couldn't ignore me or my family ever again. I channeled all my grief, all my rage, all my heartbreak into my keyboard. The clatter of the keys became my war cry. I started freelancing on cheap, obscure platforms. I created a fake identity, making myself older, giving myself a fictional background in a nice part of the city. I had to hide my age, my address, my entire existence, just to get a chance. My first project was to build a simple data entry script. It earned me $5. That $5 bill felt heavier than any piece of gold I had ever imagined. It wasn't just money, it was validation, it was proof. It was the very first brick of my empire. That was the beginning. I took on more projects, working for cents on the dollar, building my reputation one line of code at a time. I taught myself new languages, explored machine learning, and delved into app development. The nights were still long, the hunger was still a familiar companion. But now, there was a fire in my belly that burned brighter than any hunger pang. Slowly, the $5 projects turned into $50 projects, then $100 projects. I was finally able to move my mother out of the slum. The day we left, I didn't look back. Today, I run my own software development company. We build solutions for businesses around the world. My office is in one of those glittering tech parks, not far from the tea stall where my journey began. Sometimes, I walk past it and see another young boy, just like me, serving tea with a curious look in his eyes. And I remember the silence of hunger, the weight of invisibility, and the feel of that first $5 bill. My story is not just about coding or money. It's about turning pain into power and silence into a voice that can change the world. If you're struggling, if you feel invisible, remember that your circumstances don't define your destiny. Your will to fight does. They say justice is blind, but in the high courts of the city, justice often peeks from under its blindfold to see who writes the bigger check. That's where we find Aryan, standing alone in a vast mahogany-paneled courtroom. He's facing an army of lawyers, men in suits that cost more than his father's entire lifetime of earnings combined. The air is thick with tension, heavy with the weight of a battle he seems destined to lose. Aryan's creation, a software he named Tan, which means the weave, was a true revolution. It was born from the most unlikely of inspirations, the rhythmic, complex patterns of handloom weaving he'd watched his father create since he was a child. He translated that ancient logic, the intricate dance of threads, into a powerful algorithm to optimize modern supply chain logistics. It was brilliant, astonishingly efficient, and purely, unequivocally original. But brilliance attracts predators. When Apex Corp, a multi-billion-dollar tech giant, saw Tan, they didn't want to partner with Aryan or buy his software. They wanted to own it. They wanted to steal it. So they did what giants often do to the small and unprotected. They reverse-engineered his code, slapped their own logo on it, and launched it as their own groundbreaking product. And to add the cruelest twist, they sued Aryan for intellectual property theft. The very man they had robbed was now being accused of being the thief. The media circus was relentless. Every news channel, every blog post, painted him as a fraud from the slums, a con artist who had somehow managed to trick the system. The narrative was simple and cruel. How could a boy from his background possibly create something so complex? It must be stolen. The suspense was suffocating, a constant pressure that threatened to crush him. The trial dragged on for months, a slow, grueling process designed to drain his resources and his will to fight. Aryan's funds, painstakingly saved, evaporated. He sold what little he had. He was on the verge of breaking, the loneliness of his fight becoming almost unbearable. His dreams were turning to dust before his very eyes. Then came the final day of the hearing. The lead lawyer for Apex Corp, a man with a smile as sharp as a knife, stood to cross-examine him. He leaned in, his voice dripping with condescension. "Mr. Aryan, let's be realistic. How can a slum dweller, a man with no formal degree from a prestigious university, create an algorithm of this complexity? It's impossible. Just admit it. You stole this." The words hit Aryan like a physical blow. The courtroom spun. He closed his eyes, and in the darkness, a vivid flashback washed over him. He wasn't in the courtroom anymore. He was a small boy again, back in his family's mud hut. The air smelled of damp earth and dyed thread. He was watching his father's hands, weathered and strong, moving the shuttle of the loom with a hypnotic rhythm. Clack, clack, swish, up, down, cross. It was a language he had understood before he could even write his own name. And in that moment, in the sterile silence of the courtroom, a profound realization struck him. Up, down, cross. It was binary. 1, 0, 1, the foundation of all code. His software wasn't just mathematics and logic. It was his father's legacy, the poetry of the loom, translated into the language of silicon. Aryan opened his eyes. The fear was gone, replaced by a strange, unshakable calm. He looked directly at the judge, his voice steady. "Your Honor," he said, "may I ask you to look at the source code's comments, the internal notes within the program?" The courtroom buzzed with confusion. The opposing lawyers scoffed. What could a few comments possibly prove? But the judge, intrigued by the young man's sudden confidence, agreed. The code was projected onto the large screen in the courtroom. Lines upon lines of complex programming filled the display. Aryan guided the court technician. "Please, scroll deep within the core functions." And there it was. Hidden in plain sight, scattered throughout the millions of lines of code, were the variable names and comments. They were written not in English, but in Aryan's native village dialect. Words for shuttle, warp, weft, and pattern. Intimate, personal terms an outsider could never know. The expensive, elite engineers at Apex Corp, in their haste and arrogance, had copied his code line for line. They hadn't bothered to remove or even translate these comments because they simply didn't understand them. They were meaningless scribbles to them, but to Aryan, they were everything. They were his signature, his history, his identity woven directly into the fabric of his creation. It was the ultimate, irrefutable proof of his innocence. A hush fell over the courtroom. The arrogant smiles on the faces of the Apex lawyers vanished, replaced by pale shock. The giant had been exposed. The judge, his face a mask of stern realization, delivered his verdict. The case was dismissed. Aryan was not just acquitted. He was declared the sole, rightful owner of his intellectual property. The giant had fallen. The boy from the slums had won. 10 years passed. The world changed, and so did Aryan's fortunes. The name Aryan was no longer whispered in courtrooms with suspicion, but spoken in boardrooms with awe. He was one of the wealthiest and most respected tech moguls in the country. His company, built on the foundation of tan, had reshaped industries. One day, he decided to return to his village. He didn't arrive in a convoy of luxury cars with blacked-out windows. He came on foot, walking the same dusty paths he had run along as a child. He walked until he reached the old landlord's mansion, the very place from which his family had been cruelly evicted so many years ago. The grand house was now a ruin, its walls crumbling, its glory faded into a ghost of what it once was. And there, sitting on the dilapidated porch, was a man who looked defeated and aged far beyond his years. It was Bikram, the landlord's son. The same Bikram who had once mocked him, who had watched with smug satisfaction as Aryan's family was thrown into the street. This was the moment karma had seemingly been waiting for. The man whose family had destroyed Aryan's childhood was now broken, destitute, and sitting at his mercy. Bikram looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and shame. He expected scorn. He expected a lecture, a cruel reminder of the past. He expected revenge. But as Aryan looked at him, he didn't feel the triumph he thought he would. Instead, he remembered the knowing pain of hunger, the sting of humiliation, the cold nights spent without a roof over his head. He realized in that moment that if he were to crush Bikram now, to savor this moment of power, he would become no different than the cruel landlord who had started this cycle of pain. Revenge is a weak man's game. A strong man, he understood, breaks the cycle. Aryan extended his hand. Bikram flinched, but Aryan's expression was not one of malice. "I'm building a hospital here," Aryan said, his voice gentle. "On this land, I need a caretaker, someone I can trust to look after the place." He offered Bikram a job. The offer hung in the air. Unbelievable. Tears began to stream down Bikram's face, not of fear, but of overwhelming gratitude and a profound, crushing realization of his family's sins and, in contrast, Aryan's greatness. He saw not a victim seeking vengeance, but a victor offering grace. Aryan looked up at the sky, feeling a gentle breeze on his face. It felt like a familiar touch, like his father's hand resting on his shoulder, a silent approval. He had earned his fortune, bought the skyscrapers, and conquered the corporate world. But today, standing on the ruins of his past, by forgiving his enemy and choosing compassion over retribution, he had truly, finally, touched the sky. The world measures success by the height of your building, but true success is measured by the number of people you can shade under your roof. This simple truth became the life's work of a man named Aryan, years after a difficult legal battle and his triumphant return to his village. Aryan didn't just stop at building a hospital. He saw that his personal struggle, the long and winding road he had traveled, was not just his story. It was a blueprint, a map that others could follow. He founded the Loom Academy, a revolutionary school dedicated to teaching coding to children from the slums and remote villages. His mission was clear and powerful: to ensure that no child with innocent eyes and a sharp, curious mind would ever have to beg for a chance to learn, to grow, to dream. He wanted to break the cycle that had almost broken him. The academy wasn't just about teaching technology, it was about igniting potential and building futures. One bright afternoon, surrounded by the hum of computers and the excited chatter of his students, a young girl looked up at him with wide, inquisitive eyes. "Sir," she asked, her voice soft but clear, "you had every reason to be angry at the world. How did you turn that emotion into something so beautiful?" Aryan smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. For a fleeting moment, a memory flashed through his mind, his father's face, etched with exhaustion but glowing with unwavering hope. He looked at the young student and replied, "Anger is like a wildfire. It can either burn you down completely, or it can power an engine. I chose to let it power mine." This was his ultimate realization. He finally understood that the cruelty he had faced in his past, the hardships that had once seemed like a curse, were actually the friction that polished the diamond within him. The suspense of his life's next chapter was untaid about earning more money or gaining more fame. It was about a different kind of wealth, the number of lives he could touch, the number of futures he could help build. His story spread far and wide, becoming a radiant ray of hope for millions across the globe. From a boy who didn't have shoes to wear, he had become a man who paved the path for others to walk on. Aryan's life was a living testament that your origin does not define your destination. Your beginnings don't dictate your end. The ultimate test of a man is not how he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but how he remembers his roots when he finally has the power to cut them. Aryan soon found himself facing this very test. He was invited to deliver the keynote speech at a prestigious global tech summit. As he walked onto the grand stage, the air was thick with anticipation. The elite of the tech world, the innovators and investors, all waited to hear the secret behind his billion-dollar algorithm. They wanted the formula for his success. But Aryan wasn't there to talk about numbers. He wasn't there to discuss code. Instead, He projected a single, powerful image onto the massive screen behind him. It was a photo of a pair of worn-out, mud-stained wooden sandals. His father's sandals. A hush fell over the enormous hall. You could hear a pin drop. "This," Aryan began, his voice thick with emotion but steady, "is my source code." He didn't speak of profit margins or market strategies. He spoke about the heart-wrenching, life-changing moment he realized that his father's constant struggle wasn't a sign of failure, but the very foundation upon which his own life was built. He explained that every single line of code he had ever written was a tribute to the commillicence he had lost and the profound wisdom he had gained. Each algorithm was a verse and a poem dedicated to his father's sacrifice. After the speech, as the crowd buzzed with a newfound perspective, a young journalist hurried to his side. "Mr. Aryan," she asked, "that was incredibly moving. But do you still feel the pain of the cruel behavior you faced as a child?" Aryan paused, catching his reflection in a large glass window. A gentle smile touched his lips. "That pain," he said softly, "was my fuel. Without the darkness, I would never have learned to look for the light. Without the struggle, I would never have discovered my strength. Today, when I look back, I don't see enemies. I only see lessons. I don't see bitterness. I see the fuel that powered my journey." As the sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows over the city, Aryan walked out of the convention hall. He waved off his driver. He didn't want to be chauffeured away in a luxury car. Instead, he chose to walk. He walked through the bustling city streets, feeling the solid ground beneath his feet. Connecting with the rhythm of the world around him, he was no longer running away from his past. He was walking with it, side by side, as an old friend. His life had transformed. It was no longer just a story of success. It had become a timeless testament to the incredible, indomitable power of the human spirit, its ability to take a heartbreaking tragedy and turn it into a global triumph, a story of hope for generations to come. True wealth isn't measured by what's in your bank account, but by the legacy you leave in the hearts of those who had nothing. This is the story of Aryan, a weaver's son, and it doesn't end with a skyscraper or a world-class hospital. It ends with a quiet shift in the world's perspective. He proved that a heartbreaking beginning is not a prophecy of a tragic end. Aryan's life became the ultimate proof of karma, not as a punishment, but as a balance. The tears he shed as a child, facing the cruel behavior of others, became the raindrops that nourished the dreams of thousands of underprivileged children later on. Every time Aryan looked at a computer screen, he saw more than just data. He saw a ray of hope. He would often tell his students, "The struggle you face today is developing the strength you need for tomorrow. Don't hide your scars. They are the maps of your victory." His realization was simple. Life will hit you hard, but your response is your superpower. The suspense of life will always be there. The flashbacks of pain might still haunt you, but as long as you keep your innocence alive and your hard work consistent, the universe will eventually bow to your will. Aryan, the weaver's son, didn't just change his own fate. He changed the definition of possibility. He showed the world that with enough determination, even the most crushing circumstances can be transformed into stepping stones. As Aryan grew older, he started to retreat from the glitz of the corporate world he had conquered. He found that the suspense of the stock market, the thrill of closing a billion-dollar deal, could never match the profound satisfaction of seeing a child from the slums write their first line of code. The joy in their eyes, the dawning of a new future that was the real dividend. So, he began his most ambitious project yet, the digital village. He poured his resources and his soul into transforming his birth village, the very place of his deepest pain, into a global tech hub. Imagine this: high-speed internet cables running alongside traditional weaving looms, ancient crafts and cutting-edge technology not just coexisting, but thriving together. The village became a symbol of a new world, where progress didn't erase the past, but honored it. One evening, during a powerful flashback, he found himself walking past the exact spot where his family had been thrown out all those years ago. The memory was vivid: the cold ground, his mother's tears, the landlord's sneering face, but instead of the old, heartbreaking pain, he felt a wave of profound realization wash over him. He understood it then, with a clarity that shook him to his core. If that landlord hadn't been so cruel, if that man hadn't stripped them of everything, Aryan might have stayed a weaver forever. He would have lived and died in that small hut, his potential locked away. The cruel behavior of his enemy wasn't just an obstacle, it was the catalyst for his greatness. This was the ultimate karma. His enemy's hatred had, in a strange and powerful way, built his empire. He spent his final years mentoring the next generation, a role he cherished above all others. He taught them that emotion is not a weakness, but a compass. He'd say, "Your anger can fuel your drive for justice. Your sadness can build your empathy." He looked into their innocent eyes and saw thousands of potential Aryans, each with their own story of struggle waiting to be turned into a saga of triumph. He provided a ray of hope that wasn't based on charity, but on empowerment. He didn't just give them fish. He taught them how to build entire digital fishing fleets. He gave them the tools, the knowledge, and most importantly, the belief that their circumstances did not define their destiny. When Aryan finally passed away, he didn't leave behind just billions of dollars. That money was merely a tool. What he truly left behind was a world that believed in the impossible. A world where a weaver's son could reshape the future. His legacy wasn't in buildings or bank accounts. It was in the millions of lives he touched, in the dreams he ignited, and in the simple, powerful truth that the greatest victory is not just changing your own fate, but empowering others to change theirs. Aryan's story reminds us that our deepest wounds can become our greatest strengths, that the universe has a strange way of balancing its books. The greatest secret of a successful man isn't how he reached the top, it's who he became when the world thought he had disappeared. This is the story of Aryan, a man who built an empire from nothing, a name that once echoed in every boardroom, in every village square. But then, just as suddenly as he had risen, he vanished. The world whispered stories of his death, of a life cut short at its peak. Years passed, and Aryan became a legend, a ghost of a tycoon. That is, until a young investigative journalist, hungry for a story that would define her career, decided to uncover the truth. Her journey led her to the digital village, the very place Aryan had transformed from a dust bowl into a beacon of progress. Her destination was the grandest structure in the entire region, a state-of-the-art hospital, a testament to Aryan's philanthropy. As she walked through its pristine corridors, a place where no one was ever turned away for lack of money, she noticed something peculiar. An old man, frail and bent with age, almost 90 years old, was silently mopping the floors. His movements were slow but deliberate, his face etched with a lifetime of stories. He looked familiar, like a ghost from another era. The journalist approached him, her curiosity piqued. She recognized him from old photographs in her research. He was Bikram, the son of the cruel landlord who had once tormented Aryan's family. The same Bikram that Aryan, in a twist of fate, had hired decades ago. "Excuse me," she began, her voice soft. "You're Bikram, aren't you? I'm writing a biography on Aryan. I have to ask, why are you still here? Aryan is gone. You could have retired. You could have left this place long ago. Why do you continue to clean these floors?" Bikram stopped his work. He leaned on his mop, his hands trembling slightly. He looked up, and the journalist saw that his eyes were glistening with unshed tears. He didn't speak. Instead, he beckoned her to follow him. He led her out of the main hall, around the bustling reception, to the very foundation of the magnificent building. There, behind the grand marble foundation stone that bore the hospital's inauguration date, was a small, almost hidden metal plate. It was an inscription, weathered by time but still legible. Bikram pointed a shaky finger towards it. "This," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion, "is why I am still here. This is why I will be here until my last breath." The journalist leaned closer to read the words etched into the metal. It was a letter written by Aryan, discovered only after his death, a final message left for the world. As her eyes scanned the text, a gasp escaped her lips. The words she read sent a shiver down her spine, unraveling a mystery that had baffled everyone for decades. The letter began, "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer in this world. But before my story is written, there is one truth that must be known. The world remembers the day my father died. They remember he passed away on the cold floor of a hospital hallway because we were poor, because we had no money to pay for his treatment. The story that has been told is that a stranger, a heartless doctor, turned us away. But that is not the whole truth." The journalist's heart pounded in her chest. She continued reading, her hands trembling as she held her phone to capture the image of the inscription. "The man who refused us was not a stranger. He was a young doctor, new to his profession, a man who followed the rules so blindly that he forgot the oath he had taken. He saw only our poverty, not my father's pain. That doctor was my own elder brother. He had left our village years before, ashamed of our poverty. He changed his name, cut all ties, and started a new life, determined to erase his past. In that crowded, desperate hospital corridor, he did not recognize his own father, his own brother, and I was too stunned, too broken, to speak his name. I watched him turn his back on us, and in that moment, something inside me broke." The journalist felt the weight of this revelation. The entire narrative of Aryan's life, his relentless drive, his battle against the system, it was all being rewritten by these few lines of text. The letter continued, "I built this empire, brick by brick. I created this digital village, and I built this hospital. Everyone thinks I built it to save the poor, to ensure no one else would suffer as my father did. And that is true, but it is not the only truth. I built this hospital for him, for my brother. After he lost his prestigious job in the city due to a medical scandal, he was lost. I found him, a broken man, and offered him a position here, without revealing who I was. I gave him a chance to serve, to heal, to find the soul he had lost on that cold hospital floor. I built this place not just to save lives, but to give my brother a sanctuary where he could finally redeem his own soul, by serving the poor for free, for the rest of his life." The world was stunned when the journalist published her story. The suspense was finally over. Aryan's entire life was not a simple story of revenge against a landlord or a fight against corporate greed. It was a silent, heartbreaking, and deeply personal mission. A mission to forgive the one person who had hurt him the most, his own blood. He had spent his billions, his entire life's work, not on revenge, but on a chance for redemption. He used his immense wealth to buy back the one thing his brother had lost, his humanity. It was the ultimate act of karma, the most profound form of realization. The final shot of the journalist's documentary, the image that went viral across the globe, was of the hospital's nameplate. It didn't bear Aryan's name. It didn't mention his corporation. The elegant letters simply said, "The Weaver's gift, where no one is a stranger." A legacy not of wealth, but of forgiveness. A reminder that the greatest battles are often fought in the silence of our own hearts. And the greatest victories are not in what we conquer, but in what we are able to forgive. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that uncover the hidden truths of our world.